Nearly 10,000 structures were destroyed in the Eaton fire in Los Angeles County in Southern California. One of the hardest hit areas was the historic African-American community of Altadena. So many businesses, so many homes, so many lives destroyed. What does the future look like in a place that was once the state's first black middle-class community? It's now a charred shell of itself. The 5-part limited podcast series To Altadena with Love blends history and the first-hand stories of survivors. Joining us today is the creator and host of this series, Mimi Brown. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
I can't imagine that there was a person in the country watching those homes, these lives burn, that wasn't impacted, didn't feel something, whether it was just dismay, sorrow for these folks that lost everything. But the story of Altadena, I know, really hit African Americans hard, the history of this community. Talk to me about what inspired you to put together this podcast series.
Sure. You know, I, as a journalist, I went to Altadena like everyone else. I wanted to capture the story. But when I went there, I realized this is more than just a story. These are many stories. And so when I got there and I realized the devastation, the sheer impact, I started, just talking to residents, trying to figure out what this looked like before the fires. And what I learned is this was a rich community full with life and community, a place where everyone knows everyone. And I wanted to dig a little deeper, and we uncover so many things. Like in episode 2, we talk about how most black people got to Altadena during the 1960s, was during redlining, the Great Migration. And they were redlining to West Altadena, which is a part of town, and whites were on the east side of town. And so we explored all of that. And so when I got there and I learned that they were turned away, and there was one real estate agent who said, you know what, I'm going to help all of you guys find a place to live. I wanted to dig deeper and find out what that looked like.
Because you felt like you wanted people to understand all that had been lost.
Yes, because I feel like, when you can humanize a story, when you can make other people understand that this could be my grandfather, this could be my grandmother, because most of Altadena, whether we know it or not, 65% were elderly community. And so these are multi-generational homes that were lost. These were homes that were passed down to family members and generations. And so when you can say, when there's an 80-year-old woman who now has no place to go, whose 6 family members lived in this entire house and now they have no place to go. I wanted to tell those stories, but I wanted to do it through their own storytelling, like through their lens. I didn't want to tell it for them. I wanted them to tell it. And so that's what this story does. It allows them to tell their own story, and it allows you to get a little piece of Altadena before the fires, before the destruction.
Yeah, when they talked about their lives. I mean, we have these conversations about building generational wealth, and for many of us in this country, that wealth is really grounded, and a lot of times by the homes and the property we own. And well, the land is still there, but they've lost possessions. They've lost these homes that you've said have been passed down. So they're, in a sense, starting from scratch.
And what we're learning from that is that a lot of people were house rich. And so they bought their house in 1960 for $33,000. In episode 2, we talked to Robert Childs. He bought his home in 1967 for $33,000. It was worth $2.1 million when it burned down. And now fighting with the insurance company to get what it's worth is very different than it would look like, had it not appreciated to the value that it's at right now. And so they're dealing with all of that right now.
And then when you started talking to folks, I mean, these are folks that are really in shock. They're probably sad, angry, all of their emotions. How willing and open, did you have to convince folks to talk with you?
No. When I went to Altadena, they wanted to talk to me. They wanted to share their story, because this is a community that I have never seen anything like this before. They are resilient. They said, you know what, no matter that this happened to us, we are going to rebuild, and we are a community, and we're sticking together, and we're going to protect our elderly. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep outsiders from coming in and building Altadena into something that it doesn't look like. It is a town that it still has a small town feel, and predatory buyers are coming in and they're buying up property, and they want to make sure that they can hold Dena, is what they're calling it, to make sure that it still looks like what it looked like before the fires. History has shown us when there's natural disasters like Katrina or Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, they don't come back the way that they started. And so this community is rallying behind each other. They're holding benefit concerts, they're raising money, and they're trying to make sure that they hold each other accountable, but also hold outsiders accountable for not buying up the land and making it and changing it into something it doesn't look like.
Now, Altadena was really hit hard. I mean, it was essentially wiped out. Is there any thought about why it got hit so hard?
You know, I think they're still going through that process. I think Southern California Edison is still there's this huge investigation on what actually sparked the fire. You know, Altadena, again, that the west side of Altadena, where most of the African-American population lived, was hit the hardest. And so I think there's some questions there. I think in episode 3, we talk about when the disparities, the alarms came through. The black side of town got the disparities at 3:35 in the morning. The white side of town got it the day before at 7:30, you know? And so I think there's some disparities that they're going to go through and try and figure out what exactly happened during that fire, and why some were notified and why others were not.
Yeah, and was some of that predicated on how the winds were blowing? I'm just, all of that is part of the investigation.
I think all of that is part of the investigation, but you know, when you listen to stories and you hear people say, at 4:45, I was walking through flames to get out of my home. You know, I think the residents have a lot of questions about why they were not notified early enough, even though there's proof that 911 calls came in at midnight, you know, and they still didn't get that
How have people reacted, not just the residents of Altadena, but other folks listening to these stories, hearing, you know, about these rich family histories that are now just charred rubble? How are they reacting?
You know, this has had a great reaction. I am honored that the world actually is listening to these stories. I've been able to humanize some, like, there was a Victor Shaw who went viral. He was holding his water hose when he passed away. He was trying to save his home.
Did he have a heart attack or?
No, he was trying to save his home, and the flames came and he could not escape. But we talked to Willie Johnson in episode 1, who humanizes Victor Shaw. He tells us his father, Frank Shaw, loved his home, and so Victor wanted to protect that home, right? And so what it does is it changes 9,000 structures burned down. No, these 9,000 structures, they had a name, they had a family, they had a voice. And so being able to humanize these tragedies for people, and it makes them care just a little bit more, makes them hold space for Altadena just a little bit more. I live in Los Angeles, and I did not know 20 minutes down the road was a historic Black community. I don't think that we gave it that much thought, and now that it's gone,
we took it for granted.
We took it for granted, and now that it's gone, we want to make sure that we do our part to help preserve what's left.
Is there any way that people can help?
If people want to help, you can go to toaltadenawithlove.com. There's also holddena.org that is raising money to help the community come back, and they're trying to give every resident a $350,000 seed fund to rebuild their home.
Yeah, and when you look at that, you said this man bought it for $33,000 all those years ago, now worth more than $2 million. Fighting with insurance companies, and that is a story that is being repeated all over, not only Altadena, but the rest of Southern California as well. Absolutely,
because at the same time, there were fires going on everywhere. There's fires in Malibu, Palisades, and Altadena, and now with, you know, tariffs and all things like that, they're going to have a harder time rebuilding. And so what we can do to help this community in any way possible, we want to make sure that we do it, because historically, again, we've known that certain communities don't get all the help that they need versus other communities. And so it's very important to hold Altadena and hold space for Altadena and help them.
Hold on to that legacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mimi Brown, you're an Emmy-nominated journalist. You've done an excellent job.
Thank you.
And it's always nice to do what we all want to do
Yes.
in this profession, shed light on things that need to have a spotlight on them.
Yes.
To altadinawithlove.com. You can listen to the podcast
Yes.
series, and if you've got some money, you can donate to these families.
You know, I think if you really want to help Altadena, you can go to heydina.org. You can donate. You can also make sure that you are just holding space and listening to their stories, spreading the word, making sure that this community is not forgotten. I think what happens is the news cameras come in and then they go out. And then we don't hear anything else about Altadena, and they're left, some people are left paying mortgages on top of their rent now, you know, and so they're facing things that they've never faced before, and we want to just make sure that they are situated in such a way that after this is over, the rebuilding process may take 2 to 3 years. And after or more, just depending, right? And so after this is over, we just want to make sure that this community can rebuild the way it looked like before the fires.
As you said, hold Dina.
Yes, hold Dina.
Mimi Brown, thank you so much for shining a spotlight on this very, very important story.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back.